So I heard a lot about it in the past, but it's great to be visiting you here. So what I'd like to do today is to give you a bit of a background on what we do at Flybits, which is a research spin-off from a university. It's a 4-year-old startup, venture-backed company. I'll share our experience on how we moved from a very horizontal platform, came out of a lab into now a growing vertical-based platform. And then we'll keep it as interactive as possible. If we also have time, I'll share a demo with you. So actually, I want you to take your phones out, and I'm going to build things, and then you will see that things will show up on your handsets. If you look at the digital channels, they are becoming more and more predictive. So we all heard about alarm clocks that can wake us up based on our schedules and sleep patterns. We heard about coffee machines that can change the intensity of our espresso based on how stressed we are, or apps that can notify us if our bus or plane is running late. The challenge we have in the market now is that every time we want to build one of these use cases, we think we have to go work with developers, we need to bring a bunch of APIs together, we need to build these monolithic things called apps. And every time there is a new data coming in, we have to go rebuild, recompile, and then generate a new use case out of that. That was truly the motivation when we started Flybits. We said, we can read a lot of these interesting research papers around context-aware computing and ubiquitous computing, but there is no platform out there that enables us or creative people to go and build these use cases on their own and then bring it to the market and validate it. So the motivation of my team and my research team was that, can we go and build an experience design tool that can hide the complexity of data unification, normalization, aggregation, and really empower the creative units of organizations to focus more on use cases and creativity rather than on algorithmic complexities. I'll share an experience with you. I was actually looking for an office space in Silicon Valley for Flybits. And I was just looking at these like announcements, and then I realized if I want to communicate with a real estate agent, I have to either call them or I have to go to a URL and figure out whether that space is relevant for a growing startup like Flybits. There were so many factors that was missing in this interaction. Probably I had enough data to figure out what stage of growth I'm at, what type of a lease I can afford. And I didn't go through that manual process to find that. But if you think about it, the data structures that we have available these days are not enabling us to do that very effectively. Still, I need to rely on a lot of manual interventions to be able to get that data. This can also be a very familiar scene to you. Going to a shopping mall or a store and seeing these icons, and then probably taking your phone out and say, oh, you have a Facebook page, you have a Twitter page, but how do you give me a capability that I can connect to that physical store and immediately receive a very relevant, contextualized, personalized service on my digital channel, whether it's a phone or app or a wearable? We don't have that. So there is this big disconnect now between us and what we see on these two-dimensional displays and our surroundings. One of the areas that we looked at was that, well, probably we need a new data structure, a data structure that can bring all of these elements together. And instead of me as a developer going and talking to different APIs and different constructs, I can have one object that by communicating with that, I can receive a lot of context about it. A data structure that can give me information about space, about things in that space, about people in that space, about relevance in that space. So if you want to build a context-aware application these days, you have to go and figure out what services you want to bring in, what APIs you want to bring in, and we wanted to really simplify that. So we created something. This is a patent portfolio we created about 5 years ago that we call it zone-oriented programming, that really brought all of these sensory data, all of these contextual data together into one object. Whether you wanted location, didn't matter if the location is coming from GPS, GSM cell towers, Wi-Fi, beacons, NFC, all of that became available into that object. Sensor information from trackers, from fitness trackers, all the way to profile information. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but those were some of the early days of Flybits that we wanted to make this process more seamless. So one of the key things that we did, first we went and built a very horizontal platform. We really wanted people to build these experiences on their own, and then we realized as a startup that if we want to go after all of these sectors and verticals, we would have challenges scaling. Early days of Flybits, we sold to smart cities, connected campuses, even fashion shows in London, stadiums, and we realized we really have to have a focus. Organically, a vertical that approached us was the banking sector. They said, we have a lot of data, we see disruption is coming our way, and we want to innovate and build a data ecology around our data to be able to engage our customers on a more personalized and engaging fashion. So one of the companies that we started working with was TD Bank. You may know about them. They are more they're more available in the East Coast. But now, if you download their app, there is an embedded concierge service on their app that when you activate it, it starts to give you some very personalized contextual experiences on their phone. Think about it as an embedded Siri, or an embedded Google Now, or a Cortana, or Alexa. That when you activate it, it processes a lot of data, and it gives you some personalized messages. So let me share some examples with you. So let's say if I have a mortgage with the bank, and my mortgage is up for renewal within the next 3 months. If I am walking by a branch, and the branch happens to have a mortgage specialist available at that time, I receive a message on my phone inviting me to go to the branch to renew my mortgage. But at the same time, if I start to go to a lot of open houses, meaning that, hey, maybe I'm looking to purchase a new house, our context engine determines that, and at the right time, on the right device, they actually send me a message with a pre-approved mortgage offer. So now this is becoming a channel that is adapting based on the needs of that user. Or if you actually take it to one of the 8 international airports in North America, you will receive pre-approved travel insurance policies. So one of the key things we are seeing is that you have one channel that is understanding the context of the customer and is now delivering some relevant and timely information on their device. But I'd like to highlight one of the core new use cases that we built for them. They have gone and partnered with the largest train operator in Canada. The question you may ask is why? They are now providing real-time train schedule data platform updates on your banking app. Not on a transit app, on your banking app. So they use machine learning using Flybits to figure out which customers take the train on what corridor, and then they realize if they can notify you if your bus or train is running late or there is a platform change. Again, if you think about a core banking business model, you're not very clear on why do they do this. Now, think about this. A bank has a lot of data about your transactions, credit card, debit card, insurance, and many other products that you have. Now, on an aggregate basis, on a privacy-conscious manner, they also have a lot of data about your commuting patterns. For those of you interested in machine learning, if you bring those data sets together and correlate them, you have a very good insights about purchasing patterns around the city. That's an example on how you engage your customers on a more personalized basis. Bring the data in, make sure the data is not identifiable, correlate it with the rest of your data ecology, and then provide more valuable services for the bank and also for the customers. The other thing that you can think about, which is innovative, is that for this particular transit operator, they have a program called Service Guarantee, that if your train is late for more than 15 minutes, you will be eligible for a refund. If you go to our main train station in Toronto, called the Union Station, you will see these big lineups. People are waiting for that refund. Now, using contextualization and machine learning, we actually know where you're on that train, whether that train was delayed, and then if that was the case, your account will be debited. And then you create a viral communication inside that train, and hey, how come you get that and I don't? And this is going to create that viral communications that you want, leveraging some of the data capabilities that I talked about. Now, we use the same methodology if you went to CES with one of our partners and investors, Bosch. If you went to the CES, as soon as you arrived there, we could navigate you to the booths you were interested. If you were approaching a particular product, you would have received relevant information about that, and they use that to communicate with you. Now, the way we did this was the key lesson that we learned, that just knowing someone's location is not enough to truly make that contextual experience relevant. You need to have more understanding about semantics, ontologies, and the context around the user before you make that digital channel more relevant. So working with our data scientists and semantic computer experts, we started to build these ontologies for cities. For example, ontologies for retail, ontologies for banking, ontologies for airports, ontologies for insurance. And the thinking behind this is that, let's say if you have one banking app or one Samsung app, my expectation from that channel when I'm at home is very different than when I travel or when I go to the shopping mall. And just by sensing my geolocation and sending me a coupon or sending me a message, you're not really leveraging the sensory capabilities of the phone. So one of the patent portfolio that we created is that different constructs in a city will be mapped by these semantics, and then when your phone or digital device comes there, it fetches that semantics and it changes behavior. The other thing is, when we talk to most of the Fortune 500 companies, they all tell us a very common story. They all tell us, since about 2 years ago, we started something called a digital transformation strategy, and what that meant was that we wanted to bring a lot of data from different sources, make sense of it, and drive ROI on our digital channels. That's a perfect strategy. But almost all of them tell us after 6 months, 90% of their budget was spent on IT complexities rather than bringing those use cases to the market. Why? Because every data that they brought in came with a different data contract, different data structure, and they had to go and build very linear hierarchical IT teams just to be able to manage that complexities. So one of the things that we have done, leveraging new capabilities, driving microservices, effective orchestration in the cloud, is now we can also enable them to build very small, agile, and interdisciplinary product teams so they have the autonomy to bring these use cases to the market. So I'm just sharing some of our lessons learned, and then I will show you how we have made it more relevant for application design. So one was the importance of context and ontologies. One was the importance of data unification and normalization, so the end user doesn't have to worry about it. And then looking at data ecology on an end-to-end basis. So the way we do this is that we provide an SDK on Android, iOS, and JavaScript, meaning that you can enable both your native and web channels. Then through that, we give you access to a SaaS product called the Experience Studio that you will see a demo of it in a moment. That will give you access to two things, context and content. So context are basically the disparate data sources that you can bring in, make logic out of them, and then tie it back to an intervention to make it more relevant and personalized for the user. Then we will use a hybrid cloud service to look at the relationship of the data, and we generate an omni-channel experience for the customer across different devices, whether it's a wearable, a phone, a tablet, or an IoT device. So looking at the data ecology on a more scalable fashion, on an end-to-end fashion is important. So bringing the data from a bank, bringing the data from the device, even from all the other data providers, and really connect them into one data repository, connect them together, and then connect them to different templates of interventions is an approach that we have taken to build these products. Now, as you can imagine, the constructs that you use when you capture the data from a sensor is very different than the data that a mainframe platform gives you in a bank or a data provider like Facebook and others. How do you really bring them all together in a sense that you don't create a security risk or a privacy risk for that data? And that's where microservices will be very helpful. So instead of co-locating the data, you can basically create a microservice links to different repositories, and even if something gets hacked, because these are all tokenized, you really don't have to worry about it. The other innovation is that how do you do these data processing on encrypted data rather than having the need to move the data over. And instead of moving the data, you ask questions from the data. And those are some of the capabilities that I'll talk about in a moment. So to give you a quick sample, this is how that data orchestration is going to look like. You can build a context. In this case, I call it ML, or the Media Lab rule. These are all the data sets that you can, in real time, broadcast to this platform. So let's say if I want to grab data from an activity tracker, I can drag it and drop it there and say, hey, if the person is walking or running, I want this to happen. Or if I want to bring another data, so let's say in this case, I want to capture data from Spotify, you as a developer don't really need to go and worry about the Spotify API. You just drag and drop it, and now you connect two data sets together. And maybe I want to communicate with my customers differently on a rainy day versus a sunny day. So the biggest challenge that we see in the market now is that to do this in real time is very difficult because your data models need to get retrained and retuned, whereas in this model that we created, you can keep injecting the data in real time and build context capabilities out of that. The other thing we looked at was that the term AI is being used very loosely these days. You know, everybody talks about it. All their startups have an AI domain, and suddenly magic happens. But truly, when you look at AI and a subdomain of that, which is machine learning, for those of us in the field, you may agree there are about 45 different ways of doing machine learning, each specific for a purpose. One type of machine learning is very good for risk analysis. The other one is very good for optimization. So when we talk to large companies and they say, hey, I went and committed to this type of a machine learning platform, we actually get worried because they are locking down their infrastructure for the years to come, especially at a time that in our point of view, AI is at its infancy. At best, if you truly look at even deep learning at best is animal instinct, is try and error. There's no cognition there. You all remember that Silicon Valley episode that they were feeding millions of hot dog images before the algorithm realized if something was a hot dog or not. My 2-year-old daughter really doesn't need to look at 1 million hot dogs to understand if something is a hot dog, right? Those innovations will happen in the future. How do you prepare your infrastructure, your data infrastructure, to be able to leverage those capabilities as they become more available? So one of our core research areas and a patent portfolio that we created is something called the inference router. And I'll talk about that in a moment, and we'll show it to you as part of some use cases. I don't want to scare you with the molecular structure, but I will show you how it works. Ignore the green nodes for now. The other nodes, the colorful nodes, are data. So the blue ones are coming from a sensor, the orange ones are usually coming from an IoT device, and the purple ones are coming from proprietary data sources. So this could be your own infrastructure, social media, and all that. Now, I told you about the importance of context. Let's say the context that I have is I want to give a credit card to a first-year student during the freshman week. Risk is very important. If I give that inference to a neural network-based machine learning tool, it would actually try its best to give that credit card no matter what. So probably in that case, I need a different type of a machine learning capability, which is more Bayesian-based or a Bayesian belief network-based. So in that case, our inference router will remove the data sets that you don't need, increase the weights of the data that is important for that decision making, and it will route the inference to a Bayesian belief network container. In this case, this container, it doesn't have to be built by Samsung. It doesn't have to be built by Flybits. It can be built by the best startup or researcher in the world who is good with that. But you can go, or Samsung can go to that entity and say, put your machine learning capability into that container. I don't care how you built it. I don't care what stack you used. Give it to me in that container. I ship it in my infrastructure. So it really gives you this flexibility to go and work with the best of the best in the world and keep bringing their inference capabilities into your network and route the inference accordingly. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, you can have your classical deep learning tools that is looking at different data points, optimizing them, and then figure out on what channel you want to communicate with people. I'll skip some of these because I will show it to you as part of the demo in terms of how we look at experience design as a structure, how we generate data out of that, how we understand the viewpoints on how people navigate applications. I'll share that with you as part of my demo. So early days, what we did, we created a lot of ontologies for the cities, for airports, for cities, for banks. And then we started to look at spaces as a social network. So if you think about a social network, there are relationships between social nodes, between me and my friends. If you apply the same thinking in geographical spaces, you can do a lot. What is the relationship between Samsung as your working place to your home? And how do you use that as semantics so when your phone or device travels between the two, the experience can also adapt? So we applied some of that methodology into our thinking. And then we started to practice with some other capabilities. We said, well, how can we go beyond just a two-dimensional display by showing icons and push messages? Can we actually apply this to other mediums? So one of the works that we did in Canada was we mapped an airport terminal and we put augmented reality markers on those signage systems. And the use case we had was that we wanted to use context to navigate people indoor without using radio. So people could actually come, scan that marker, and based on their context, whether they are an arriving passenger, departing passenger, a business traveler, a leisure traveler, they could actually point their phone at that marker, select their point of interest, and we could basically navigate them at the airport. This is about a 4-year-old technology, but I wanted to share with you kind of how we practice with some of these to build a scalable platform. So this was one of the use cases that we built a smart space without relying on instrumentation or radio or signals. And the way it worked was that you could basically select a geography. You can associate an ontology to it. So in this case, I say I want to map the Media Lab. I want to say, hey, this is a educational facility. So the right ontology got activated. And then I could go and assign logic and application to that space. So when my Samsung phone came into that location, it actually fetched not just the content, but all the semantic around that space and gave me a behavior that was relevant to my need. Now, our lesson learned here was that what if I have contextual experiences that are not location-based? How do I go beyond location and truly use location as just one of the context elements, but not necessarily the core one? And I'll talk about that in a moment. So this is a use case that you can fetch these services from your whole ecosystem, tied back to a location which is mapped by some sort of a semantic. And when all of us, let's say, come into the Samsung building, we may receive very different experiences on their handsets. So this was a use case that you see a phone icon on your device, but if we click on it, we may actually route the call to very different gateways because of our context. So let's say if my language setting is in French, I will be dialing a French access number, and if yours is in English, you will be dialing a different number. But it's one icon and one service that you see on your device. Then we started to work some on other use cases, especially around wealth management. So now we are working with different entities, BlackRock and many others who are thinking about the future of wealth management using context. So use cases such as figuring out if someone got paid a bonus in their checking account. It's also sitting as an influx of cash for more than a month, but they also indicated through another channel that they are interested in investment. So figuring out at what time I can nudge them and say, if you move X amount of cash from your checking account into that investment instrument, you're gonna be steps closer to retirement, or you can buy a holiday home. So again, all of these examples are not necessarily apps built by us, are use cases that are built on top of our platform by people in all sort of verticals. That's kind of what I wanted to get to in terms of looking at things as a platform. And then from the data point of view, after you engage with the customer, there are so many things you can do. So this is an example of a bank that they have come to us and said, we have entrepreneurs becoming our new clients. So these are kind of some of them, not all of them. Some of them will be our future wealth clients. And also, I also have a lot of baby boomers who made their money. How do I build a network so that I can connect them together, so kind of create this mentor-mentee relationship, so the bank is not just being seen as, hey, just give me your money and I will deposit it for you. I actually become a recommendation network that, based on the profile of the new type of a client, which is an entrepreneur, and kind of a more established client like a baby boomer, I actually connect them together so they can learn from each other. So that's another example that we worked on. Or let's say in the case of insurance, we are now working with an insurance company that are enabling a game with the Flybits SDK. So this is about encouraging kids to become more active. If you're playing this game and you're stationary and not moving enough, the game will slow down. And this is connected to a health tracker. It encourages the kid to go and run and walk around, and then they will achieve scores and lifelines in the game. So it's really connecting the online world to the offline world with the purpose of wellness and fitness and all of that. Now, some of the last things I want to talk about are how we are thinking about the future of channels. Sure, we can enable apps, we can send push notifications, we can show icons, but you can also leverage these capabilities on other medium. So this is an augmented reality use case that we mapped different parts of someone's life, and it's about connecting your plastic card. Sorry, let me see if I can go back. It's about connecting your plastic card to, let me see if it plays it. No, anyway. So you can connect your plastic card to an augmented reality marker, and if you look at it at a trusted location, it will generate the augmented reality overlay showing your balance and important things about your account. But if you're using it at a place that is not known or is not secure, it will ask you to type your PIN. So instead of using icons or wallets for that, you can basically leverage augmented reality tools. or things we have done with robots. There is now a Flybits SDK running on this Neo robot that is basically enabling the robot to understand its context. So this is a use case that, this is actually done with Discovery Channel. The robot was in our office. It identified the people and colleagues in her proximity, and it started to dance. And then we moved the robot to the food court across the street. It didn't detect people, and it sat down and pretended that it was crying. So really, we are leveraging these capabilities not just for programmers, but for people who are interested in experience design to leverage our tools to create a more contextual digital experience. And then we also used it when Prince Charles visited Canada, so we had to train the robot with his pictures. It was a stressful day in the office for the robot to recognize his face and bow and welcome him to Canada. It detected the face, so I'm happy it worked, but for those of you interested in image recognition, you know that's a so complicated thing to do. We are using it in payments, so now we are looking at the future of hold on, some of my videos don't work. We are using it for the future of mobile wallets that, please work. Let's see. Anyway, so when you tap your phone on a point of sales, it will process a lot of information. It says you have this loyalty program. This is a type of a purchase that makes you eligible for this type of a loyalty program, so use this credit card. So it's really on-time, real-time recommendation service. And the reason I show that to you is to show you how the importance of context can go from channel to channel. This is another research project. All research units do something with coffee machines. I don't know why that's the case. But this is a coffee machine that is in our lab. This is a picture of our lab that is connected to Flybits. So when people walk in, it measures things from their activity trackers. It looks at their calendar and a bunch of other data points. It changes the intensity of the coffee. It makes the coffee and send them a text message. No business model around it, but again, our thinking on how we can adapt the environment based on some of these contextual experiences. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the future. All of the things that I showed you are deployed with customers, are in the market, are using our existing platform, but we are also looking at what's next and how the dynamics of the internet is changing and how we can get prepared for that. So if you go on Twitter now and you follow Samsung hashtag, all of us will see the same thing. There's no context there. So one of the patents we filed, we actually called it the lens, is that you kind of put the lens in a curly bracket. So if I go to Samsung Lens now, I see things about Samsung that are relevant to me. Versus if you go on Samsung Lens, you will see we embedded that zone object that I talked about within that lens. And then we built models. We actually launched something with one of our partners in the UK that you could basically arrive in the city, and then you could wear different lenses in a city and view the city from other people's point of view. Or we had use cases that someone landed in Paris, and then he or she could follow a friend's path. So they could see, oh, when she was here, she was listening to this music, and then she went to this bakery. And we created these authoring tools that instead of us relying on these centralized repositories like Google and Facebook and Yelp and Yellow Pages, people can actually decentralize that process a bit and rely on each other's expertise. And some of it, of course, is based on the core patent portfolio that we created, but now we are giving it a bit more B2C flavor. Or you could follow celebrities. They could share the lens with you, and when you went to a city, you can basically follow their path. Now, the last project I want to talk about is the project that I'm currently working with my team at MIT, which we think is going to have a fundamental impact on how we are leveraging digital services and the internet. So let me share an example with you. Let's say I'm a student and I want to consult an intellectual property lawyer It's going to cost me probably about $500, $600 per hour. It's expensive. I may not be able to afford it. But imagine I could actually activate the persona of a lawyer who has shared his or her expertise with me, and I can consult that, whether you call it an avatar or a bot, for $9 per hour. When you think about practices like law, in some cases medicine, there are lots of repeatability there that you can, it's a perfect use case for classification. So a framework that we have built at MIT, which we call it the swappable identities, is that I can basically create these digital constructs, leverage my data assets from around repositories, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, email accounts, Skype, and all that, and then really create a digital avatar of myself and lend that as an expertise to someone. Now, from the ergonomics point of view, you can think about a Siri that instead of you asking questions from algorithms, you can basically activate someone and ask that individual a question. And with a high degree of possibility, you can generate answers that are relevant to what they would say. Or you can basically give feedback in real time to make that more tunable. Now, journalists would like to give this a darker side. They called it augmented eternity, that, you know what, when I die, can I create a digital heir? There was a Black Mirror episode on that. Probably you can do that, right? So a test we did was, of course, President Reagan did not create a lot of digital footprint. We had to archive some of that, and we ran some tests on data sets and then compared that with some of the archives we got from President Trump's speech, and then the word wall came up, right? It was interesting, very interesting for us, but there are things that you can do to make these more advanced and more capable. But the shift that we see is we are going to, if you look at the principle of B2C monetization on the internet now, at the end of the day is that people go sell ads. No matter what you do, you generate traffic, you generate some network effects, you monetize that network effect, and you sell ads. With this, we think we can shift that business model, because if I can now monetize sharing expertise, sharing knowledge, you see some of that with things like Amazon is doing with Mechanical Turks, but really take that to a next level, that I'm willing to share part of my persona or part of my profile with you in exchange of value, and then monetize the network effect. That way, we think that's going to be a good shift that we can look at, especially in the B2C internet. So I will summarize my presentation by going through some of the observations that we have had. In our point of view, AI is not really artificial. It's basically an extended intelligence that we can use. So a principle we learned internally at Flybits was it's better to build decision support tools rather than decision maker tools. We are still very smart beings. We have intuition, we have gut feeling. Those are very powerful things. And when you're building user interfaces, make sure that this is going to support a decision and not necessarily make a decision for the user. And those are two very fundamental, different principles of design. When we hear these big companies go and build very big AI teams, and when you look at them, they are all data scientists or algorithmic experts, we usually tell them that look at AI in a more interdisciplinary fashion. Build smaller teams that include designers, UX experts, people from anthropology background, sociology background, and data scientists, and really empower those units to run your AI strategy. It's different if you're in a university, but if you truly want to commercialize AI, we have seen that those interdisciplinary teams work better. Really go through this cycle of research, demo, and deploy, rather than say, hey, I have a 1 year of research, and then I'm going to look at it on a more linear fashion. Going through those cycles, especially around data intelligence, is easier. Because to be honest, if you look at the previous innovation boom that we had, think about, I don't know, App Store and these app repositories in 2008. Back then, you could build the coolest application, become a millionaire or a billionaire without leveraging any external data. You could build a game, you could build a social networking platform, you could build a flashlight app. If the next boom is an AI boom, even if you have the best AI algorithm, without data, you don't have anything, right? AI without data doesn't mean anything. So how do you build for that? How do you build for capabilities to fetch the data while the privacy of the customer is protected? How you can run processes on encrypted data and ask questions from the data rather than that. So that's going to be important. And then, so I just wanted to highlight the importance of privacy. It's not about creating a trade-off between functionality and privacy. It's to how to do it right. It's not about moving the data over. It's about figuring out smart ways to ask questions from the data. So let me pause here, see if you have any questions. Hey, go ahead.
Hi, really nice presentation.
Thanks.
So, I mean, do you know if there are any efforts to standardize the data? Like, are there any standard governing bodies which have like a common set of data which everyone can use? Because there's always an issue of permissions. Like, I don't want to give, like you took an example of the bank. I don't want to give my location to the bank.
Yeah.
So then there'll always be a conflict between what information is out there and what like someone can use. So how do you standardize this whole process?
Sure. I think it's a very important question. So on one side, you can see regulators are coming in. You have directives like PSD2 in the UK. You have GDPR, which is becoming more popular. I don't think we have reached the standardization phase now, but a project that I really like and I encourage you to take a look at it is a project at MIT called OPAL, or Open Algorithms, which basically is for algorithmic transparency. So when you send the data, even now with GDPR, the way the data is being processed is that it's within a black box. Imagine that you as a user, you can see what's happening inside that algorithm, and then you have some control to go and tweak that. The background around that type of innovation is, don't move the data over, don't even give me the data. You encrypt the data in your premises, but agree that you can run an algorithm in your network that allows me to ask questions from that data. Give me the questions in advance. I vet it. I vet your algorithm. You don't even move the data out of your premise, but I agree with you on a SLA or data contract that I can now ask questions from that data. There are innovations like that that can truly transform how we look at data privacy. Because at the moment, there's always this friction. What data am I going to give you? How much data am I going to give you? Where are you going to store it? Where is the repository? And we hear all of these horror stories about security attacks. If you change that paradigm to say, don't give me the data, agree with me on what types of questions I can ask from your data, vet it, I think that's going to be a good model to look at. It's not standardized yet, but it's a step towards that reliable elicitation with the data.
That makes sense. It sounds like an interface, like a C++ interface class.
Maybe, yeah. So that algorithm can be written in anything. It's up to you how you want to run it, but the paradigm or the framework is that just run the algorithm inside the premise, ask the questions from outside the premise.
Okay,
cool.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. So why don't we do this super quickly? I want to keep the demo short to 5 minutes. So why don't you all go to this URL here? So let me show you how this works. Everything in Flybits is an experience. So I have now an experience called Samsung information. I have an experience for students, for 837 events, and for different types of people. Each experience has a name, has a group, and has some context associated with that. So now what I can do, I can go and get data from any repository that I want. So this is kind of how you build a context hub. As you can see here, these are off-the-shelf data sets that we give access to. from activity tracking to calendar to battery level to even location management. So for example, if I want to target a customer who has enough battery power on their device, I can basically quickly use that as a context. Or if I want to communicate with people who are only on Wi-Fi versus 3G, I can do that. Or even if I want to use location, I can do that. I can say Samsung. Anyway, so I'll just use this and I can build a quick location around that. I can build that experience with or without location. And now I can go and connect to some other proprietary data, which are all coming from other repositories. So I can say I'm interested to target student customers, and I am interested in people who travel, you know, at least once a day, once per year. That can come from a different system. And I can save that, and I can say this is a Samsung demo. Then what I'll do, I can go and grab content from other external repositories. So let's say I have Samsung phone, Samsung information, different things. So these can come from external systems, and I can gather them here. And I will go and create a new experience with that. So I say it's a Samsung experience. I will use this as a context, and I say if that's valid, I want to activate these interventions on the device. Just connect these two. Let me just call it Samsung 1. Okay. So now, how many of you are on the phone, in case you could see it? Okay, perfect. So what I want you to do, on the bottom right corner, you should see something called My Samsung. So just go there. And I couldn't build very relevant Samsung profiles, so there are now 3 profiles out there. You can choose the one that you want. These usually are learned through our system, but I don't have any integration. So maybe you tell me a little bit about yourself. And then what I'll do now, I will go and activate, let's say, an experience for student customers. And for those of you who selected students, you can see now in real time, I'm now curating a lot of data on your device from different repositories that are relevant to you. I'm now going to create an experience for salespeople and also for grandparents. So now in real time, you can see I can go fetch the context from your device, fetch the context around where you are, and then generate a lot of experience. I don't care whether you're on Wi-Fi, on 3G, I can generate that. And now, if I want to give you all an experience and invite you, let's say, to an event, I can now take over your screen by activating the 837 events. So this way, I can now, what I wanted to share with you is that I don't care where the data is coming from. I don't care the structure about the data. I can quickly put the data sets together, tie it back to an intervention, deliver it on the devices, whether it's native, Android, iOS, and web. And then what I'll do, I will go and gather a lot of data about that. So if you look at just now, in real time, I'm monitoring who's interacting with the student experience or with the salespeople experience. So it should load it. And then this data is now going to go into a machine learning tool to figure out patterns. So if you think about millions and millions of users, not even you can capture the data in real time. I can now model the data because I have taxonomies, I have ontologies. So without really complicating it for users, within 5 minutes you can go build these experiences on your own. Whether it's a new phone coming out and you want to make it an experience that, hey, come to this event and then things will show up on your device. Or depending on the profile of the user, you want to engage with them differently. This was kind of some of the areas that we thought that we can simplify that process. So that's all I wanted to show you, I know it was kind of all over the place, but I wanted to kind of tell you a little about the history, what we learned, what we did to simplify it, and then making it a bit more tangible by showing you a demo. Would love to talk to you all, have a lot of respect for what you do here and at Samsung, so if there is an opportunity to do something together, we'll be more than happy to chat. Okay, thanks for having me.